the pursuit of happiness, something that's built right into the foundation of our nation, the pursuit of happiness. It's something that we all seem to be hardwired to go after, the pursuit of happiness, particularly those of us who are in America, those of us who live in this culture of America. We pursue happiness with everything that we have. We spend our time, we spend our money, we spend our emotional energy all on trying to pursue happiness. And so we go to social media, we look at everybody else, we try to compare our own subjective level of happiness of others. How am I doing? Am I happy? You know, we hold happiness as the highest of all values in our culture. And so, you know, many of us, we want a job. Doesn't matter what it pays unless it's going to make me happy, right? It's got to be in my passion area. And we say things that let us know that happiness is our highest value. Like we'll say things like, well, sure, he's got the super nice house and a beautiful family and a great job. And sure, he drives a Tesla, but is he really happy? And so again, happiness is like the highest standard, the highest thing, the highest value of our culture. And so my question to you as we begin today, as we begin this series is, are you happy? You know, if you were to put yourself on a scale of happiness, where would you be? Very, very happy to moderately happy to somewhat happy to very unhappy. You know, if this room were a microcosm of our nation, about 30% of us would say we're happy, that we're thriving in life, that we feel like we're doing well, that we're content. But 70% of us would say, not so much. And according to all the studies that are being done on our happiness that we continually commission, things continually get worse. 2017, Gallup conducted this poll on our happiness like they do every year. They interviewed over 2.5 million people on our level of happiness. And the bottom line is, we're not very happy. And we're getting less happy every year. As a matter of fact, what they found was 2017 had the largest year-over-year drop in our happiness since they began to monitor happiness. We're getting unhappy really quick. And there's a lot of studies that are demonstrating this, that despite our incredible affluence, despite the freedom, despite the quality of life, despite the technology that we have, despite the health and the access to food and clean water and all the things that we have in our country, that we continually get less and less happy. Time magazine did a poll on optimism and pessimism, another way of kind of gauging our happiness. What do we think about the future? Is the future going to be brighter? And what they found is that in 2005, a full 79% of Americans were optimists. That's the America we know and love, right? The future is bright. We're optimistic. 8 out of 10 people in 2005 were optimists. By 2013, when they conducted the poll again, it had dropped to 50%, and now we're well below 50%. We have moved from being a nation of optimists to being a nation of cynical pessimists. We don't believe that the future is going to be brighter. Other studies have been done. They're done every year. For instance, the Happy Planet Index. This is a happiness gauge of the entire planet, and they kind of rank countries on where they fit in terms of happiness. And the United States, despite all of our affluence and all the things that we have, ranked a dismal 108th out of 140 nations in our happiness index, demonstrating the fact that our affluence is not translating to happiness. And everybody's writing about these studies that are being done on our happiness. So for instance, Fortune magazine wrote this last year. They said, while economic growth has gradually been on the rise in the U.S. since the financial crisis, Americans' happiness has only been getting worse in recent years, according to the 2017 World Happiness Report. In fact, U.S. happiness is at its lowest score since 2006. The Washington Post also chimes in saying, Americans have been growing steadily more miserable for decades. Wow, that's so not happy, right? And in this very clever book, I thought, America the Anxious, How Our Pursuit of Happiness is Creating a Nation of Nervous Wrecks, Ruth Whitman writes this. She says, Americans as a whole invest more time and money and emotional energy into the explicit pursuit of happiness than any other nation on earth. But is all this effort and investment paying off? Is America getting happier and happier? Are Americans more content than people in other countries? Is this great American search for happiness actually working? The answer appears to be a pretty clear no. Somehow, this great nation that included the pursuit of happiness so prominently in its founding principles has been shown by various international comparison studies to be one of the less happy places in the developed world. Wow. So if you came to church happy today, chances are you're not very happy right now. But here's the point. We want happiness. We pursue happiness. We spend time and energy on getting happiness, but we're not happy. And so can we come to the conclusion that we don't know how to get happy? That maybe we're pursuing happiness in all of the wrong ways? Another way to say this would be, if we really knew what would make us happy, wouldn't we be there by now? I'm so glad that you're at Newday. Whether you are here today and you're happy or you're unhappy, whether you consider this your family or you're here just seeking spiritually and looking for answers about Christianity or life, I'm glad that you're here because today we're starting this new series called The Secret of Happiness. And for the next 6 weeks, we're going to be kind of tearing apart this thing that all of us want so much, happiness. And we're going to be looking at the things that make us happy and the things that don't make us so happy. And today we want to start by looking at what doesn't make us happy. And I'm just going to give you the bottom line right now. I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to say before I say it, so that if you have to take a nap or you have to leave early or whatever, at least you'll know what I said. And this is what I'm going to say to you today, is that nothing can make you happy. What doesn't make you happy? Nothing. Nothing can make you happy. Or we could say that a little bit differently by saying no thing can make you happy. No life circumstance, no possession, no achievement, no accomplishment, nothing. And I think most of us would say we intuitively know this. You know, if I were to sit down, we were over coffee or whatever, and I say, hey, what makes you happy? That none of us would point to the stuff that we own. Well, my car really makes me happy. I love my car or my coin collection or my stamp collection or whatever it may be. I love it. It just makes me happy. Most of us wouldn't point to our achievements or our diplomas or our GPA. Most of us wouldn't point to, the things that so often, the things that we buy or, the things that we often go to. But if we then started to study how we live, that's when our lives begin to betray what we say we believe, right? Because what are the things that we're actually spending our energy going after? Well, it's those things that we can buy. It's the new job title. It's getting to the next level of achievement. It's the more lavish vacation. It's all of these things that we're running so hard after. We said we don't believe they make us happy, but if you looked at the way we're living, it looks like we believe that they might actually somehow, just for us because we're different, make us happy. But if we want to again have evidence for the fact that these things don't make us happy, we can go and we can look at one of the most affluent, one of the most successful, one of the most smart, powerful men who ever lived. And he was a king of one of the most powerful empires in the 10th century BC, and his name was Solomon. Solomon had it going on. And if anybody could achieve happiness by something, it was Solomon. You see, Solomon was the king of Israel during Israel's heyday. Like their one moment shining in the sun, Solomon was on the throne. All of their enemies had been defeated. They were so wealthy, it said that silver was like worthless in their kingdom. They had so much wealth. Solomon was a wise man. He had over 3,000 wise sayings, many of which are still in circulation today. He was a musician with over 1,000 songs credited to his name. He had kings and queens coming to him from all over the world to learn from his wisdom. He was renowned around the world for his military strength. Again, he had no enemies. They were the highest empire in the Middle East, the most powerful empire. His architectural feats made him very famous. He put Israel on the map for trade, both import and export. I mean, Solomon had it going on. He had power. He had influence. He had possession. He had women. He had everything that this world would say, if something's going to make you happy, you can get at it. And so was Solomon a happy guy? Well, Solomon actually ended up writing a letter toward the end of a book toward the end of his life that is now this ancient document included in our Old Testament. It's called the book of Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes is different from any other, seems, book of the Bible. It's got this just different tone to it. And Solomon writes it toward the end of his life, and he begins this book actually by saying in chapter 1, verse 2, he says, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And you're like, wow, yeah, this is a very different sounding book of the Bible. I mean, it's not like hope and love and all those things that you'd think from the Bible, but it's meaningless. This is how he starts his book, and you may wonder, well, what is he talking about? What's meaningless? Why is everything meaningless? Well, what he's going to do through this book is he's going to catalog everything he pursued with all of his life, all of his time, all of his influence, all of his power, all of his authority, all those things that he pursued in order to try and find meaning in life, in order to try to find happiness, and how empty it all left him. And so he begins this catalog right in chapter 1, and he starts to talk about how he pursued education. And he thought that if he had enough degrees after his name, enough letters after his name, if he studied enough world philosophies, that eventually he would be able to find the secret of happiness. But what does he say about education? He says this in chapter 1. He says, I devoted myself to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under heaven. I thought to myself, look, I have grown and increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge, but I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow, the more knowledge, the more grief. Let me just say, I'm a proponent of education. I love education. I think education enhances our quality of life and gives us a better chance of being happy. But for Solomon, he said he searched it all out. He learned everything he could. He was more wise than anybody else. And in the end, he's just like, it's meaningless. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Right? So then he's like, okay, well, maybe it's not education. So he goes for like the party scene. I'm going to have fun. Okay, if it's going to school isn't going to do it for me, I'm just going to have fun. And if anyone could have fun, it would be Solomon, because again, he had the world at his disposal. And so he writes this. He says, I thought in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is foolish. And what does pleasure accomplish? In other words, he says, I'm just going to go out for a good time. I'm just going to have a good time. I just want to have fun. We think that fun and happiness are like synonymous. And according to Solomon, they're not. You can be having fun, but not be happy. Okay? He goes on and he says, I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. So did pleasure do it for him? No. Again, he says, it's all meaningless. It didn't get me to where I wanted to be. It left me feeling empty. So then he continues about other things that he tried. Listen to all that he says in chapter 2. He says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasures of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. So do you see all these things that he says he's pursuing in order to find happiness? Projects. Architectural projects and gardens and hobbies, and he's going hard after wealth. He has so much wealth. He has more riches than anybody. He has singers and employees and a harem as well. We know that he had 700 wives, 300 concubines. Wow. Okay, he became greater by far than anyone. The guy's got power. The guy's got influence. The guy has got, everything you could want. But in the end, this is what he discovered, that I forgot that one. How did it end for Solomon? He said, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and when I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. All of it. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. And so really the bottom line for Solomon is he discovered that no thing can make you happy. No thing. And again, I think intuitively we know these things. Accomplishments, achievements don't really make us happy in a lasting way. Certainly, we celebrate when we have an achievement. We're like, that was great. I'm glad I did that. We're happy for a short time, but like a caffeine buzz, it kind of like wears off over time, and then we got to accomplish something else. If accomplishments and achievements made us happy in a lasting way, most of us would be resting on the accomplishments we have already achieved, right? We'd be able to say, wow, look what I've achieved. That's been great, but we need to do more, right? It's not enough. The things that we buy don't bring joy and happiness in a lasting way. Again, there's that initial buzz, but it wears off so quickly. Think about the last new car you bought. How much fun that was and how happy you were to have that new car. And for at least 4 or 5 days, you were happy, right? all the things that it can do, or the last new phone that you bought. Oh yeah, the new phone, it was shiny and it had longer battery life and it could get more apps on it and it had more power and you were happy, like this phone is going to change my life. I'm going to be happy now. But that new phone is now an old phone. Now you need a new phone in order to be happy again, right? And the cycle continues. Not even sex can really make us happy in any kind of lasting way. Otherwise, we'd just do it once and it'd be over and we'd be like, I'm happy, it's good. Power. If power made us happy, then the most powerful people on the planet would be the happiest people on the planet. But is that the case? I think we can look at the most powerful people on the planet and say they don't look really happy, at least from a distance. And as much as we intellectually know that these things won't make us happy, as much as we agree with that in theory, okay, I get it, no thing can make me happy. We continue to pursue these things as though they will make us happy. Again, our lives and our actions betraying us. And I think one of the things that trips us up and continues to make us stumble into this belief that things can make us happy is this thing that I'll call the I'll be happy when trap. And you know what I'm talking about with the I'll be happy when trap? That we continually push living, we continually push joy and happiness into the future until something happens or we buy something or we've accomplished something or we're in a certain place, right? So when we're in high school, we'll be happy when we graduate, right? Yeah, then I'll be happy. And then we're in college. Do we have some seniors in the house, apparently? Yeah. And then when we're in college, we're going to be happy when we get the job or we graduate or we meet the certain someone. And then, when we're dating, we'll be happy when we get married. And when we're in the workforce and we have that big project, we'll be happy when that big project is finally behind us. Then I can breathe. Then I can live. Or when you start getting close to my age, then it's retirement, right? You're like, wow. On those really rough, I got to be honest with you, this gets me a lot, but on the really rough days, when things are really stressful and you got way too much going on or things are heavy, and you're just like, I'm going to be happy when. I think I could just cash it all in right now, go live on a beach somewhere, go into retirement. We are a culture that is so romanticized retirement, right? It's called the pornification of retirement, that we have put it up on this thing that it's going to deliver something that it can never promise. But we tell ourselves, when I retire, then I'm going to be able to live off my savings. I'm going to be able to do what I want to do, wake up when I want to wake up, go where I want to go. There's going to be no stress in my life whatsoever. I'm going to be happy all of the time. But there's so much wrong with that. Right? I know for me, if I'm on vacation for 2 weeks, I start getting antsy, right? We need some stress in our life. But really, there's so much wrong with that just because we are postponing our happiness and we are thinking that something, some circumstance in the future is going to finally bring me happiness. But the reality is no thing can make you happy. And here's the unfortunate reality, and I need you to lean in here because I think this is a really important point, is that when we postpone our happiness or when we pursue our happiness in the wrong ways, it leads us to become more and more unhappy and more unfulfilled to the point where we get depressed, anxious, and we experience despair. This is exactly what happened for Solomon. As you read Ecclesiastes, as you read he's pursuing happiness in all of these wrong ways, that it doesn't just lead him to be like, I guess that didn't work. It leads him to despair. Listen to what he says. He says, I hated life. In other words, I didn't want to live anymore. This could start to sound familiar in our culture. I hated life. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. In other words, what is the purpose of life if this is it? This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair. When we pursue happiness in the wrong way, it leads to unhappiness, to despair. Interesting book that was written called The Search for Satisfaction by David McKinney. And he writes about Solomon in this book, and he says that all these things that Solomon pursued are like life's spam. You guys know what spam is, right? Not that gelatinous stuff in the can, but the spam we're much more familiar with today is the stuff that comes into our email inbox like every day by the dozens, and some of us by the hundreds. How many of us like to get spam? Anybody get happy from spam? Like, it brings you joy, brings you life? No. Spam, by very definition, is something that comes into our inbox that promises something that it can't deliver, right? A lot of times you look up, this is going to change your life. Click this link, it will change your life. And I won't even talk about the things it says it's going to deliver. But what we know is that those things are not going to deliver. As a matter of fact, most of them are usually disingenuous, that they're promising something that they can't deliver, and they know it. And that all the things that Solomon was pursuing were like his life's spam. That 3,000 years ago, his inbox was filled with this, and it's an acronym that stands for the things that Solomon chased after: sex, power, achievement, money. These are the spam of Solomon's life, the things that promised so much, but in the end, underdelivered. And this is what we're faced with today. 3,000 years later, we are still pursuing the same spam. The same spam is still promising life, but in the end, delivering so little. It's a lot like pornography. Pornography is this huge addiction, this huge industry in our culture because it has such power to promise so much, but in the end, deliver nothing. It promises intimacy, it promises joy, it promises love, it promises happiness. And in the end, it delivers emptiness and distortion and death, addiction, chains, imprisonment. This is what life spam does. It promises so much, and in the end, it delivers so little. And it left Solomon depressed and in despair because the promise was empty. And could it be that it's doing the same thing to us, that we as a nation, we are leading the world in spam. We are leading the world in affluence. We are leading the world in all the things that spam is promising. But we're also leading the world in depression and anxiety and mental health issues. Could the two be connected? Could we be living in a nation that is unhappy because it has been running in the wrong direction so hard? Well, is that the end of the story for Solomon? Does Solomon just end his book, and that's the end, and I died? Well, almost, but that would be a tragedy. He actually gets to the end of his book, and after all of his searching, after all the things he was running so hard after in order to try to find happiness, to try to find the meaning in life, he actually at the end gives the secret that he had discovered in the second to the last verse of the book, and it is not what you would expect. Not from Solomon, certainly, but at the very end of his book, the second to the last verse, chapter 12, verse 13, this is what he says. He says, "Now, all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." Wow. Really? Fear God and keep his commandments? That is like the secret of happiness? And Solomon said, yeah. Or to put it in a little different way, worship God and keep him at the center of your life. Well, I got one. Amen. But I think for most of us, we kind of question that. Like, wait a minute, time out. You're telling me that if I pursue God with everything that I am, that I'm going to find happiness? Because if most of us are honest with ourselves, most of us believe that God is the guy who secretly tries to keep us from happiness, right? That God doesn't make us happy, that God tries to keep us from happiness. That if I put God at the center of my life and pursue him with everything that I am, that's not going to lead to happiness. I may become a better person. I may be a better husband or a better wife, a better student, a better worker, a better neighbor, a better person. But more happy? Come on. Really? But that is exactly what Solomon is saying. And if we look at every other thing we chase after in order to make us happy, we see it has this promise of life, but in the end, only delivers emptiness, only delivers death. But God is the only one who comes along and says, if you will put me at the center, if you will pursue me, I am the only one who can give you the life that you really want. Which is why, in the very first of the 10 Commandments, he says, Worship no other God before me. Have no other God before me. If you want to live, put me first. It's because God knows he's the only one that can give us life. He knows that everything else that we chase after, which he would call an idol, something that would go before him to give meaning and purpose to life, only can deliver death, only can deliver emptiness. They are giving false promises. They're spam. And he says, if you really want to live, put me first. Everything else is idolatry. And again, we may be surprised at the idea that the secret of happiness is found in putting God at the very core of our being. Okay, maybe you're not so surprised that you're hearing this in church. Maybe you'd expect to hear that in church. But again, we kind of question whether this could actually be real, whether this could be true. But here's my question. If we haven't found the secret to happiness yet, I mean, if a full 70% of us would say, I'm not very happy, then would it hurt to really try a different direction? And that's what I'm going to ask you to do. I mean, maybe to admit we don't know what will make us happy after all. And maybe just for the next 6 weeks during this series, would you just commit to be here as we talk about things that actually could lead to happiness as we put God at the center? And just for 6 weeks, to say, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to go all after this. And at the end of the 6 weeks, just say, am I happier? I mean, really, what do we have to lose other than 6 weeks, right? I would hope that all of us would be able to figure this out before the end of our life, like Solomon. I got to tell you, I'm so glad I didn't wait till the end of my life to figure this out personally. My own story was, at the age of 13, I decided that I was going to kind of do what Solomon did. I didn't do it quite as good as him, but just pursue. I mean, if the world says something's going to make me happy, if it's going to be fun, I'm just going to pursue it times 10. I'm kind of driven in that way. I just wanted to go hard after things. So from 13, it was wine, women, and song and everything else that I could do to go after those things. And for like 10, 11 years, I did everything I could to just have a good time. And by the time I hit my mid-20s, I looked at myself and did a kind of self-assessment and realized I was an empty shell of a person. That the things that were promising to give me joy and make me happy were actually leaving me broken, leaving broken relationships in my past, broken people in my past. I was obnoxious, I was selfish, I was unhealthy, I wasn't happy, I was 50 pounds overweight. I mean, I was just not in a good place. And that's when I made the decision, you know what, I think I'm ready to try a new direction. And that's when I said, I'm going to pursue God and put him at the center of my life with the same amount of passion and energy I've been pursuing these other things. And something aside changed for me. Addictions began to fall away. My relationships began to change. I began to experience joy in my life as I developed new habits of reading the Bible. I started to pray. I plugged into a Christian community. I began to look for opportunities to be kind to people, to leverage what I had for the sake of others, live generously, give things away. And I got to tell you, those first few years of following Jesus and worshiping him, keeping him the center of my life, were the happiest years of my life. Now let me just say, I want to be very clear. This is not prosperity gospel. This is not Jesus will make you happy gospel. Jesus never promised to make us happy. Right? That wasn't kind of part of the deal. This doesn't mean you put God at the center of your life and every day is going to be sunny, you're not going to have any problems, and you're not going to have some things to work through and everything's going to be cleaned up. That's not what we're saying. But here, I'm convicted to my very toes on this, that every person on our planet, regardless of the circumstances in our lives, is better off with Jesus. That Jesus enhances every life, and we cannot truly thrive. We cannot truly live. We cannot truly be happy without him. I know that was true for me. Those were the happiest years of my life, and you may say, well, aren't you still so happy? Let me let you in on a little secret here. The thing that I've discovered, and I think the Bible would attest to this, is that happiness is like level 1 of what God has intended for us in this life. That if the goal of my life is to be happy, that I'm aiming too low. Because God has so many more things, so many more rich things that he wants me to experience that are so much greater than happiness. And that's where we're going to turn next week. We're going to look at what does God really want for us after we get to happy. If I can get to happy, okay, what is next? But in the meantime, I just want to say to you, and again, challenge you, would you, for the next 6 weeks, just commit, if you're not doing this already, to just put God at the very center of your life and say, I'm just going to pursue God with everything that I am. I'm just going to assess my level of happiness. Is it rising? Is it declining? Is this making a difference? Again, what do we have to lose? Could it be that God really is the secret to happiness? Let me pray. Our Father in heaven, may we each, in this moment, just commit to putting you at the center. We have chased after so many other things that have left us wanting. And I think we could all relate to the fact that we have been left wanting. May we come to you, the well that does not run dry, and find in you the source of what we've been looking for. For those of us who are here today who are anxious, depressed, in despair, hopeless, not wanting to live anymore, God, may we turn to you and in you find a source of comfort, a source of purpose beyond anything that we have ever found before. And God, we pray that you will come through, that you will deliver, because we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.